Pixar's releasing a new movie? Huh. Interesting. Wonder if the teaser's out yet. Oh, here it is. Okay.
What would you want to be known for on Earth?
What? Pixar's gonna make a Ratatouille passion-filled project with heart and it's gonna be made.
Probably for doing this funny cowboy dance?
Oh. Well, okay, that's a really awkward line, but whatever, I'm sure it'll be. Oh. Well, it's not exactly what I wanted. I mean, they spend a bit of time in the real world, but Inside Out was spectacular, so I'm sure it'll be good. I mean, it's Pixar. When have they made bad movies? Oh.
I hate them.
Alright, so Soul. What the hell happened exactly? There's a Pixar masterpiece in here, I know it. I'm telling you, this could have been one of the best Pixar movies ever made. Based on the great first teaser, my first thought was Ratatouille. Taking a simple, well-fleshed out, artistic, mature theme and developing it in a good way is Pixar's specialty. And I was really hoping that they would go the Ratatouille route by showcasing a character dealing with their desire for more in life. Well, okay, I guess that's also every Disney movie.
I want adventure in the great wide somewhere.
Ratatouille did this really well. The Incredibles did this really well. Oh, and what do you know? Those are the two best Pixar movies. Soul didn't really do this, but we'll talk about that later. For now, I want to draw attention to the fact that this opening is actually really good. The first 9 minutes and 21 seconds of this film are actually on par with Ratatouille. First off, let's address the thing I was most worried about going in. Mr. G struggling with what he wants. And that was honestly handled way better than I was expecting. I mean, it is really simple for a music teacher to want to play a gig, but the way this is shown to us is different and unique. I love Mr. G's spark when he realizes the talent and the drive one of his students has. After an introduction of the classmates being, unmotivated, here's a person who's so into their music that it makes their band teacher beam. It's a really great representation of what one student can do to a teacher and their classmates. And as a fellow musician, yeah, it was cool. I love that Curly was inspired by Mr. G to play music, because it not only adds to the theme, but it also makes the theme more inclusive, which is another thing I thought was done really well. By saying that he was inspired rather than inspired to play music, it opens the floor for the theme to be more broad than music specifically. Anyone can be inspired to do anything. And obviously, my highest compliments go to the piano scene. This might actually be one of the best scenes they've ever done. Huh. That would make for a good video actually, but seriously, I can't even find one thing wrong with this scene. It starts off a bit worrisome because Mr. G is not sure how to play their piece, but he does it. He figures out everything, the tempo, the key, the time signature, everything. And then, it happens. He solos. As someone who's obsessed with every instrument, piano, trombone, guitar, drums, I haven't played a saxophone yet, but I'm still obsessed. This scene speaks to me on such an emotional level. Seeing him be completely into his music, seeing the others be stunned, seeing the blue lighting that complements this heavenly feeling, it's honestly magical. Seeing this for the first time was magical, and I was so excited for what the movie had in store for me.
Probably for doing this funny cowboy dance?
Why does Joe die here? Why are we going to this blue blob world? Why are we abandoning this potentially really interesting conflict in favor of Joe trying to get back to the human world? Why does Jerry not know what's going on? Why does Terry not know what's going on? Why are we gonna put this really interesting scene in the movie if it's just gonna be used for one point that Joe could have learned literally at any point in the movie? I mean, we could probably look at more of his life instead of this one flashback scene. How is Soul 22 gonna give his Earth Pass to Joe if he can't give it right now? Don't get me wrong, this isn't like the worst thing ever or anything, it's just so rushed. Every good idea that this portion has is completely forgotten about to make way for another idea before that one gets rushed out the door to make way for even another one. I mentioned in my Pixar ranking that my biggest problem with Finding Dory was that it had a feeling of luck that I really hated, jumping from one location to the next despite the characters never actually affecting the plot. I get a very similar feeling here, though not quite as bad. The rules are never really set in stone, so the movie basically just does whatever it wants. Sometimes the characters go through space and time, sometimes they fortunately fall into the ground, or sometimes they spontaneously wake up in each other's bodies because the writing decided that it wanted to be bad all of a sudden. Don't worry, we'll get to that. Yeah, the writing was pretty messy in this movie. Don't get me wrong, the dialogue is fantastic, just like most Pixar movies are. Unfortunately, though, like I said earlier, because the movie never sets any rules in stone, everything is left up to the writers, and they just throw things that simply don't make sense and weren't talked about at all. The worst example of this, in my opinion, is when Joe is trying to come back to Earth, and they just happen to find a guy who can bring them back. First of all, the fact that they come across this guy in a seemingly limitless world is at the very least questionable, but whatever, I can excuse that. I mean, that's more of a plot hole than an actual problem. My real problem is that this guy's solution to get them back home is so idiotic that I can't excuse it. He opens a portal to Earth even though I thought no one was allowed to do that except the Terrys, and then asks Joe to envision his life in his body. Why? I thought Joe was dead. I thought he was going to the great beyond, not a hospital bed about to die. Is this what happens to people who are about to die? They either choose to go to the great beyond or choose to jump off this railing and hope that they find a guy with a ship for the rest of time? Or does that only apply to souls that are on the brink of dying and souls that are dead feel compelled to go to the great beyond? See what I mean? This world is just so confusing because again, there are no rules. One movie I think will be compared a lot to this film is Inside Out. And while I do think that comparing this movie to Inside Out is not viable, putting aside that I think that movie is better in every single way, one thing that's hard to deny is that the world that movie created is a lot more clear. Yes, of course you can nitpick things like shouldn't subconscious and dream world be connected in some way, but for the most part, it's easy to follow. There's a headquarters where the emotions control Riley, there's her islands of personality, and there are stations that are constantly operating like one would imagine her brain would. But you want to know the worst part about this world? The thing that frustrates me the most about the entire movie? The world that Soul introduced has so many creative touches sprinkled throughout the movie, to the point where it easily could have been at the level of Inside Out. The saving lost souls concept was one of the most creative ideas Pixar has ever shown us. The idea that these people can quote-unquote lose their soul is such an inspired idea, as it seemed these souls were wandering around aimlessly with their only goal to drone on day in and day out. Outside from this one joke, this movie doesn't take that idea and turn it into comedy, which was such a refreshing change of pace. I mean, Onward's great, probably better than this movie, but the intentional comedic potential of a pair of walking legs kinda makes me forget that the dad is dead, like, it's a pair of walking legs. It's mostly just a dopey side character, not really an actual dad. Outside of a couple scenes, I guess. I also mostly enjoyed Soul 22, as she addressed a plot hole in the film, and I always like that sort of thing. What if a soul doesn't know what they want to be yet? She was also really, really funny. Based on the trailer, I was worried that her jokes were going to be insufferable, but the concept of a soul being so annoying that she's lived to make all of these important figures hate her is more than enough to carry the comedic weight of this movie. The scenes with Lincoln and Mother Teresa, oh my god, they were just so funny. Dude, this movie is so funny. I actually do like the dynamic between Joe and Soul 22 a lot in this movie for the most part. They play really interesting roles in the themes and story, which we'll get into later. But man, the way these ideas are all presented is nothing short of terrible. I believe they had good ideas, but they don't really know how to execute it, which resulted in this hodgepodge of confusing ideas. Oh well, the next part is on Earth, and I loved when this character was on Earth before, right? No, stop. What are you doing? No. No, stop. No. Alright, I'll admit I'm being a bit dramatic. This choice does offer a really interesting extra layer of Joe's character arc. He gets to see what a carefree, no-goal-in-the-world version of himself acts like to his friends. It's actually a pretty interesting dynamic that ultimately ends up being pointless because the conclusion has nothing to do with that, but we'll get to that later. Listen, this is an interesting choice, but it's not incredible or anything. And that comes down to a few different things. I'll start with the most obvious problem that Joe being a cat causes, and that's the simple fact that Joe is not piloting his body. Anything that reaches the level of brilliance as the beginning is ultimately muddled because Joe himself can't react in a good way. All he can do is react with his facial expressions, and that only goes so far. The only person who can affect the situation that's happening, regardless of what it is Soul 22. This is where I start getting annoyed with the character, because she doesn't have the memories or life experience Joe has. All she can really do in this situation is make jokes. When I was watching Soul, I chuckled at them, but in hindsight, it robs the movie of potentially really beautiful scenes, if the only person who can say the compelling things is everyone besides the protagonist. Probably the worst instance of this was when this trombone player comes to Joe's house wanting to quit. Instead of seeing an inspiring exchange between Joe and the trombone player, all we get is a one-sided conversation between them, where the dialogue can only convey its drama through one person. It's so incredibly frustrating. This is also the part of the movie where the film strays away from drama in order to tell more jokes. I would say that overall it works, but because the drama has such gaping flaws, the movie turns into a buddy cop comedy thing, which, I mean, come on. That's not what this was. This still made for a casual, fun time with sparks of creativity, but they aren't able to be fully fleshed out. Meanwhile, while these two characters are wandering Earth, Gary, the 2D supervisor of the Afterworld, I think, is looking for them because Joe is not supposed to be on Earth right now. I'm just gonna come out and say it. This is a really stupid ticking clock. The idea that this singular supervisor has to look through every single file of every single person who's ever died to find Joe is really stupid. Why don't you tell anyone to be on the lookout for another soul? I mean, you guys are supposed to be super smart, immortal beings. I'm sure you can put two and two together. So finally, Terry and Jerry have caught up with them, and now Joe has to go to the great beyond. But then this movie gives us its first twist. Soul 22 gives her Earth pass to Joe. I don't know how I feel about this. On the one hand, it doesn't really fit with what came before it, because again, how does Soul 22 give her Earth Pass if she can't give him the Earth Pass in training, or whatever it's called? It also makes your movie worse if you split the main characters up before the climax. I'm so tired of seeing that. But on the other hand, that's mostly a nitpick because this idea sets up a chain reaction that creates easily the best part of the movie. Except the opening, because seriously guys, you don't understand how much I wanted this movie instead of this movie. These last 15 minutes or so, while maybe not quite as mesmerizing as the opening, are still fantastic. Seeing Joe be disappointed by his new life is such an unexpectedly powerful message. Unlike the rest of the movie, the way this is told is really, really interesting. It shows that Joe never really learned how to appreciate the simple things in his life, which is a direct parallel to Soul 22, who never found a passion or a goal and still enjoyed her life. Well, I guess it wasn't her life, but still. It gives the moments these two share together a ton of retroactive purpose, which proves that these writers obviously had some level of foresight. Joe, realizing this, goes back to Soul 22 and apologizes, which again shows these writers know how to implement their smart ideas. Seriously, seeing Soul 22 be a lost soul after all the trauma she's endured in her life is exactly the kind of movie I wanted this whole time, and really keeps you on the edge of your seat. But I just don't consider this to be a great overall movie. I really wanted to love Soul, you guys. I love a lot about it, but when considering the overall package, it's merely good, not great. And that really sucks because unlike other merely good Pixar movies, this one had a lot of potential. I do think a lot of the compliments this movie has received are valid, but the abundance of negatives really dragged this one down for me. I can casually enjoy this film, but it frustrates me because it could have been so much more. If they had fleshed out some of the better ideas instead of throwing a million at you, this could have been something really special, but nope, I'm gonna have to put this one in the overrated category, and it's really disappointing that I have to do that for this film. As far as putting this on my Pixar list goes, this is probably in between WALL-E and Finding Nemo. Better luck next time, I guess. 6 on 10.